Hello and welcome back to the Lib Dem Podcast. I know it seems early, but it really isn't. This episode is all about getting your planning right for the general election. Welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Welcome back. This is the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I am a councillor up in Preston. I'm the leader of the Preston Lib Dems, and I host the Lib Dem Podcast along with lots of fellow activists, volunteers, and councillors. And one of them that's joining me today is Sam Al-Hamdani. Hello, Sam.
Hello there.
Right.
Yes.
You called for this episode because you thought our listeners would quite like an episode on what they should be thinking about, starting to plan ready for a general election. Now, obviously, there might be some people who are in target seats who are thinking about this, but this is really for the kind of non-target areas, really, the ones that don't get as much attention. And just in case people are wondering, am I in a target seat? If you are in a target seat, you probably know that you're in a target seat. And actually, if you don't know, then you're probably not. But actually, there's some really good important rules of how we can use a general election for you to grow your seat, even if you're not a target seat, because ultimately, we don't want to be stuck at, 50 to 75 seats. We want to be going beyond that.
Absolutely. It's some of my most active campaigners now are people who in my non-target seat, because I'm very much in a non-target seat, are people who in 2019 were really angry about things and came over to Hazel Grove, which is my nearest target seat, and went out and did stuff and got the bug and have carried on doing stuff locally.
Yeah. And so, like I said, there's lots of victories beyond just winning an MP. There's lots of ways you can help grow. And I suppose we should just say, though, and it is a point that, one of the key things you can do now when you're organising is actually working out when you can and can't go to a target seat, because, we've seen from these massive by-election successes, when Lib Dems come together, we're an incredible force, but our resources are finite. And actually, we do need to make sure we spend them in target seats.
And hopefully your target seats near you will be getting in touch soon. So I have two hats. I work for Hazel Grove Liberal Democrats, which is a target seat, and I'm deputy leader for Oldham Liberal Democrats, which is definitely not. But one day. And I've started getting in touch with all the paired seats in my area. And just saying, right, this is what we're going to be doing. So we have a general election launch campaign launch coming up soon. And so we're just getting in touch with those local parties and going, right, okay, we're going to be doing this. What do you need to get your people to come and help support us? Because it does have to be slightly transactional. Like, I think it's a reasonable thing. If you're going to come and help somebody in a target seat, you are going to do it because you want a Lib Dem MP kind of in your area. But as John was saying before, like, what are you going to get out of it? And that will be partly your own people getting more training and more knowledge, but also, getting something back. When I went and helped in Hazel Grove in 2019, I also got a lot of support for what I was doing in Oldham from the team in Hazel Grove.
And you've got to think, some of your councillors, some of your campaigners will really only start getting really jazzed up about politics. I know it sounds daft, but not all of us are pothole fanatics. And actually, being part of a general election, being really excited, in your case, to get Lisa Smart over the line, is actually a really motivating factor. You feel like, yeah, we're going to take out a Tory MP because they're the people that you see in the press, and actually using it as a way of galvanizing existing volunteers and attracting new volunteers from your area is really useful.
Yeah, I've been in complete sort of dead seats, frankly, and that's really tough. And it's not just tough because there's not people there, but also because you don't get to feel what it's like to win. And that's just having that experience of being part of a winning team is something that really can keep you going when you have to then go back and do the really hard yards that are involved in being a non-target seat, in being a place where you haven't got very many members, and those that you do have might not be that active. Like that can be really hard work. Because
And from a planning point of view, what you can do now, which is the kind of the point of this episode, is that you can start getting in the diary maybe days where you're going to come across. So, I mean, like in Preston, we have Saturday action days going via our various wards. But also, why don't you think, okay, well, actually, one of those action days, we're going to get a carful, maybe 2 carfuls. We're going to go up to Tim Farron's Eat in the Lakes, or we're going to come down to Stockport, take out with Cheezel and Hazel Grove. All those sorts of things. Think, right, we're really going to make use of that collective energy and put it into a parliamentary seat that's going to do something.
And you don't need too many people to do that. Like 2 or 3 people in a car makes a massive difference. Yeah. You know, that sort of your energy coming into a target seat is a wonderful thing, because you can get your head a bit sort of buried when you're in the target seat. You're kind of like, you've got so much stuff to do, and having 3 kind of new people who are just quite excited to be there, coming in, hitting it for a few hours, you'll be amazed how grateful and how much difference you can make to a campaign.
And it's a reciprocal thing as well. You know, it re-energizes you back. So there's no kind of bad point to this in terms of like the target seat gains, you gain, you know, your team gains. It's all really good to do. And like I say, it's really helpful. And we talk about a lot how we've missed the big conferences, because being around like-minded Lib Dems, going through the same issues, striving for the same goals is incredibly energizing. And actually, and the by-elections have the exact same thing. You know, a lot of people love going to help out in parliamentary by-elections because there's a buzz about it. There's a bit of, we're going to take them on. We're going to do something spectacular here. That is fantastic. It's just manna from heaven for your supporters and for your volunteers. So, yeah. So plan in days that you can do. And so for me, I work here in Manchester. I'm at ALDC HQ at the moment. You can tell because I've got a big old rhizo behind me. Is actually on the days I'm at HQ, if I'm down here anyway, I will then one day a week or one day a fortnight, I will go out and canvass in Cheadle and Hazel Grove, just because it, you know, every little helps in terms of them. And it also, from their point of view, if you're an experienced campaigner, it's sometimes nice to get a slightly outside perspective on things. You know, say, actually, we've been in the weeds of this particular topic. How does it feel to you, John, having just come into it and looking at it with fresh eyes? So that is, again, it's all benefit.
Yeah. And so John said about planning. I think if you're not a target seat, there's a couple of different seats you might be. And so what your planning will look like will be different according to which of those you are. Like if you're a development seat, like there may be quite a few people here listening to this who are kind of 3rd place but pushing to be 2nd place, and so you do have like you've got a really specific goal that you can make progress on at a general election level, and you've not got to let that go. So there's certain things you have to do, and so what you want to do is work out, right, how much do we have to do in our seat to achieve that, and how much free time does that leave us? If you're in a really, you know, we've got seats where we've got very few members, like, and I know Oldham West and Royton, which is half of my local party area, like we didn't keep our deposit last time. We put out the general leaflet. That was pretty much it, you know. And there's a lot of places where we're in that area. Now I know that we might do some campaigning. Like we have actually built up our local party a bit since that last general election, and so we'll likely want to do a bit more. But still, like really, we're looking at a little bit more than that as a campaign. And it's working out, right, okay, there will be a lot more productive things for people to do by going somewhere else. So what are the baseline things that we definitely need to do? And then let's concentrate, once we've done those baseline things, right, let's go out and do all the other stuff for somewhere where we can kick a Tory out.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, there might be a couple of places where we can kick Labour out, and I'm quite happy about that too.
Right, so let's go other things that local parties can do outside of obviously helping with target seats. So things that you need to get sorted. Let's talk about money. So one thing that has to be sorted is your deposit. So for those that don't know or are new to politics, so in parliamentary seats and big seats like mayoralties, etc., then there's a level of deposit that needs to be got. So we'll just deal with parliamentary for now, Sam, because it makes life easier, because we're talking about the general election. It's a £500 deposit. And in order to get that back, you must get over 5% of the vote. Now, I would say, given that we're pretty healthy double digits, most areas, well, actually the vast majority of areas, they will keep their deposit. But you do always have to have in your mind that you might lose that 500, particularly if there's a particularly contestable Labour versus Tory seat and you're getting squeezed, like we've seen in, say, the Uxbridge by-election or the Selby and Ainsley by-election where we lost those. They are by-elections, so they'll be slightly different. But, you've got to be prepared to potentially lose that 500, Sam.
Yeah, and I think there's some people listening to this who will have had an experience before where particular regions were able to support people. That won't necessarily happen. Like, you definitely can't rely on it. So you need to be thinking, how do we cope if we don't get that £500 back? Because I know for me, like, the cost of a deposit and that leaflet that goes out with the Royal Mail, that's a lot of money in a small local part, a real lot of money in a small local party. And just having planned ahead for that and thought, what happens if this doesn't go well and we don't get our deposit back, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And just and you've brought on the other things that you might want to spend money on and having some money for. And so the free post general election communication mailing that we get offered, again, we'll just explain for people, those that don't know. So as part of a general election, the Royal Mail offers you free delivery to every household. There's slightly intricacies, so you can have an unaddressed one that goes everywhere, or you can have an addressed one that gets a couple of attempts at people. So for some non-target seats, so just dipping the water in, the unaddressed one, it comes in a standard form. You'll pay attention to whether it's the National Party, ALDC, election workshop. They'll all have templates you can use and then buy into, etc., to go into. But you might need to have a chunk of money to be able to do that. I mean, we'll have a little debate in a second, Sam, about whether we think that's the best use of money, because it is an interesting discussion to have. But you do need to have some money aside to do something for the general election, ideally, Sam.
Yeah. It's important that you like. I thought about it in terms of the benefits. So I've got two in my local party. We have two constituencies. One where we've had the MP quite a long time ago now, but we have, and we're stronger in that area, and one where we're not. And all of our councillors are in one of those areas. But for us, we thought about the free post, and it was a fair amount of money, which we managed to cover. We got about 3 major donations, which covered it, and that was, we went out and we targeted a couple of people and got that. But because what we thought was, these people in this half of our local party area have had no communication from us for, 2 years at least, because we were getting general elections so often. But we didn't have active campaigners there, or if we did, it might be one person doing a little something at a local election. And it was just a chance to it was an easy way to remind everybody that we still exist in an area that we're not strong. And so we were thinking about it, not in terms that we knew we weren't going to keep our deposit, but it was a good way of actually, for local campaigning, going, there's a one-hit way of just getting to everybody and just reminding everyone we're here.
Yeah, and I suppose that's one side of the argument, is saying, you're getting £20,000 worth of free delivery from the Royal Mail or whatever it is, it's worthwhile doing. Now, we've talked a lot on this podcast about the effectiveness of leaflets. Absolutely, leaflets. You should always do leaflets. We talk about the focus, your regular focus deliveries, but we do say a leaflet isn't going to win you an election. Only 1 in 10 of them gets read. It's about volume. It's about repeating messages. It's about variety of messages. And so you've got to then work out, and I'm interested in your opinion on this, Sam. So if you'll have to work out as a local party, particularly if you're only interested, if you're maybe in a complete black hole and you're just thinking about one ward, maybe breaking onto a council for the first time, is that money you might spend better spent doing several mail drops in that one ward, or one mail drop everywhere, because a vast amount of that everywhere drop will not make any difference. It will come. It's nice to give people who've never seen anything a leaflet, but if you then don't campaign there for another 4 or 5 years, the limited effectiveness of that leaflet and the lasting effectiveness of that leaflet is quite limited.
Yeah, I would totally. Yeah, we had a couple of people. We didn't have active campaigns in that area, so we didn't have a ward we were targeting. We had about 3 or 4 people who were okay. We can potentially be running campaigns here. So we knew that there was a spread area where there might be multiple campaigns, and it was easier to attract money to get a general election leaflet out than to try and attract money to say, because we didn't have a specific ward campaign, we didn't have somebody who was already firing. So it's not just like if you can attract money you wouldn't attract otherwise, then it's worth doing.
Yeah, so, and I think you've brought up 2 points there. One about fundraising, which we'll come on to in a second, about how you need to be ready for people who may be willing to give £100, whatever, because it's a general election. Be ready to how you deal with that. But I suppose one of the other things we should talk about the election communication, the free post, the thing you get, is actually who you're going to get to do that, the rules on it. And obviously, again, a little bit later in the episode, we're going to talk about agents and how you need to train up someone who's ready to go for the general election. But actually, so you need to be aware of and manage your expectations. That if you go for a particular run, say, I'm going to use, so if the National Party decides to run a scheme where they will, print and get it to the Royal Mail for you or something like that, you are going to be quite low on their priority if you're not being a target seat or a moving forward seat. So that leaflet may not arrive before the postal votes. If you want absolute control of that free post, you need to learn the rules and give yourself the option that you might have to go to a different printer and sort out with the Royal Mail separately. So that is something absolutely you should plan in your head. Get and understand the rules and regulations regarding what rail. And actually, when I've done this before myself, the Royal Mail were super helpful actually with it. They were quite good with me. So that's something that you should think of. Anything else I've forgotten there, Sam, about the free post that you want to bring in?
No, I mean, but it is knowing those rules. Like there are specific, you can't be larger than specific sizes, you can't be heavier than specific weights. Also, you have to have them bundled as Royal Mail want it to be bundled, because otherwise they probably won't deliver it. No. So if you don't follow their rules, that is the outcome. You won't get your leaflet delivered, and then you've just spent £2,000 on some nice paper firewood.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah, some kindling. So you talked a little bit about fundraising. One thing I would, in planning for fundraising now, like I said, there'll be people that get on board with the general election. We're going to talk about volunteers and how you deal with them. But basically, what your local party needs to be doing now is thinking about, okay, if we get someone who wants to give us money going forward, how are we going to, use that money? How are you going to thank them for that money? Because ideally, a donor is brilliant, a regular donor is fantastic. So I would say have things like a thank you letter template ready to go from the candidate, so you can then just print off, get it to them straight away, and it just gives that really wonderful impression. Also, make sure you're checking your local party bank account. You've got good checks with your treasurer. So if anyone does start donating through either the new websites or however else, or send you a check, however they're going to do it, that you have a process in place that treasurer is going to check fairly regularly, let you know if donations come in, and then you can then follow that up with a thank you and ideally go and see them or give them a phone call.
We need to do it not just for the thank you, because you said we were going to talk about agents later. It's really important just to make sure it's all legal. Yes. You have to know who's given you that donation, particularly if it's of a reasonable size, so that you can declare it properly, and so you don't get into trouble and your agent doesn't get into trouble.
And that's whether it's during the election period or beforehand, because we know it's a weird place in politics at the moment. We know we're at the fag end of this Tory government. We know that people are starting to think about general elections. It's very soon on the horizon. Everything's building towards it. That this interest and peak, and you're seeing it now. When I go out canvassing now, there's each week I get more and more sort of general election sort of inquiries. In like just last night, there was one about immigration, there was one about various other things that come up, and it's becoming more in public's awareness that a change is coming, and it could be a big change in the government. So you just need to be ready for that. Other things, Sam, that you need to prepare for, ready for the general election with your local parties.
Having a candidate.
Yes.
Especially if you, and this is especially for those seats that are sort of in the middle of nowhere with very few members. So at some point, we will try and have a candidate in every single seat. At some point, somebody is going to need to get a candidate in place. And having sorted that out early, especially if you're a non-target seat, means that there isn't going to be a kind of regional person panicking and desperately trying to fill seats. You know, Val J, who was doing it in the Northwest at the last election, was trying. You know, she's amazing and did an amazing job, but was having to fill a whole load of seats at the last minute. We've got more time to do it this time, but we can't let that run away. We need to make sure that we're further ahead, that we have people in place. So who was your candidate last time? Are they prepared to do it again? And can you run that process? And if so, get in touch with your region and get the short process run and done. Because that means you don't have to think about it further on, and neither does somebody else. And they can spend their time doing something in a seat that we can win.
And think if you can help out areas as well. So in 2010, I had got selected, I got approved, beg your pardon, to be a parliamentary candidate a couple of months maybe before the general, not maybe around the Christmas time before the general. And I had all seats had been selected, but I had got myself approved, and I said, look, we have a spare seat in Stalybridge and Hyde. Would I be willing to be the candidate there? I had been approved. They knew I wasn't going to say anything stupid. They knew it was going to be a paper candidate. We did use the free post, to be fair to us. And that was it. So that was me just helping out, and actually, when you're in a seat where there's absolutely no attention whatsoever, I mean, maybe slightly different now with more social media, slightly more kind of Zoom hustings or whatever else that you might have to do. But generally, there's very little call and demand for you if you go out and help in a different seat in your region, but slightly away from where you live. But for me, in a weird way, I got 8,000 something odd votes in Stalybridge and Hyde. I think I was definitely third, but I don't think I've had a higher amount of votes since when I was just starting off. But that is somewhere you can help other areas as well. Is if you're interested, even if you're not. Your long-term goal isn't becoming an MP. It's a nice way of helping out the parties. Get yourself approved.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just go through that process. I did it a couple of years ago. I didn't find it too painful. I just found it quite an interesting experience, actually, to go through that. You know, there's a couple of things where you tested on the knowledge of policy, but it wasn't like somebody grilling you over a desk. It was just being asked about it. And then we did a workshop where we tried to figure out, you know, if something goes wrong, what do you do? And we didn't kill anyone, so it was all good.
No, yeah. So really important to get candidates. It just makes the whole point of this episode is to make life a little bit simpler for you because when the general election does come, which I assume is going to be autumn next year, you've got as many bricks in place so you don't have to think about it. Although you should.
I'm going to pause you there. It might be autumn next year. It might be May next year. And we have to work like it's May next year, because if it is, then we're not ready for it if we work to autumn.
Yeah, absolutely. No. And you cut me off in my pride. I was going to say, you need to be, that's why we're getting stuff ready now in case anything gets caught. For me, I do think it will be autumn. If it's in May, that is another issue. And we should be aware as well. And if you're a lot of councillors or people who are involved in local politics, do listen to this podcast and you're thinking, and we've got local elections next May. And if a general election falls on the same day, that changes that a lot for us. So again, that is one of the things where you need to be, we talk about winning before Christmas. That is really important in this year, is getting out. We're already out. We've got weekly canvassing sessions in our patch to build up that data, build up our level of kind of pro Lib Dem. You're putting karma in the cup kind of thing in order that you can spend it later on. Because if a general election hits on the same time, it's going to be a lot tougher fight in a lot of those local seats. So yeah, absolutely, that's a really good point, Sam. Other things you can get ready, I'm going to talk about some of the practical things you can get ready. So again, it might not be for every local party, but you'll probably get more people interested in having posters in their windows, maybe garden stakes. So these are things where you can start thinking, actually, is it worthwhile me buying 50 Correx boards from Lib Dem, just having them ready, just in case? I think that's probably a good thing to do. Likewise with posters, just get a pack of 200 window posters so they are ready to go. Any other kind of materials you think we might get a little bit earlier, Sam?
Well, I'm just going to specifically on Correx, because now you declare it when you buy it, and you've got more room on your expenses for a general election than you do for a local election. So it's a really good way of building up your stock of stuff that you can then reuse for multiple elections. I think that's a really important. I actually bought a load of Correx last year for my own ward, even though we weren't doing as much campaigning here. We were concentrating on seats we were building up, because I had a bit of room in the budget, and it was a good way of having that supply for later on. So use it, think about your general election. What can I use for the general election that I can reuse the year after?
And it gives you good practice. If you're thinking about, I don't know, we haven't had many garden sites or posters before. Actually, one of the things you can do, and you've seen it from any of you that have been to the parliamentary by-elections, how important a good poster campaign is, and how visual and impactful it is. So parliamentary by-elections are a different beast altogether, but the way Lib Dems were able to squeeze the Labour Party so effectively in these by-elections is because we had so many of these orange diamonds throughout them that it became obvious that the Lib Dems were the main challengers. And it's amazing how it can make you, again, it's about energizing yourself. If you're in an area that's not target, having a couple of garden signs up is really nice. And think of it as a way, one of the things that local parties sometimes don't do enough of is engage with their own members, engage people that were supporters. If you're contacting them now, talking about, we are getting things ready for the local elections and the general election, wondering if you would, like to start volunteering, would you be interested in putting up a garden post for election time? It's all good. It's all good news, really, in terms of, because even if they say no, you've still had an engagement with them, and they've dealt with you, and you've had a chat, and you've had more engagement with your members.
I can't tell you how good of, my ward, which we didn't hold any of the seats in when I started, and the first posters were in my mum and dad's house, and that was it. And the difference to a couple of years later, when there's sort of 50, 60 posters up, and I tell you, the feeling when somebody referred to my ward as a Lib Dem stronghold, it's like going through that process. And that starts with you asking the first question. That started with me going to my mum and dad and going, is it okay if you put a poster in the window? And them saying yes. You just have to ask that first person, and going to your supporters and doing that. It's a really positive experience.
Yeah, and it can add extra things. So we decided after the May local elections, we had a new organiser involved with our local party. We've obviously got big elections coming up locally. We've got the general. We thought we'd do a little mailing to our members, mainly because also we've got really quite dramatic changes in our parliamentary boundaries. So we thought we'll put a mailing out explaining who's going into what parliamentary seat, but also, a little bit of a fundraising thing in there, a little bit of a please volunteer thing. And we've had new people sign up to our 100 Club fundraising. We've had, and I was knocking on a door who was someone who was just a registered supporter, not a member. I was doing some canvassing in my ward, knocked on her door. So it just so happened she'd had a letter and a door knock, and she's now signed up to deliver leaflets for us. So that's, this thing does work. Sometimes we're just a bit shy about doing it.
Yeah, I do. I think sometimes we talk about these things, and I think people go, "Oh God, I'm not doing that," and you can sometimes be quite down on yourself. I do exactly the same. I don't make as many phone calls as I feel I should make, and I beat myself up about it. And then every so often I kind of go, but actually, just doing one phone call is better than no phone calls. So just do a thing, and forgive yourself for anything that you haven't done. Just make every time make one step.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's talk about a really key point. We alluded to it earlier on, is getting your agent ready. So
yes,
this has changed, hasn't it, Sam?
So yes, because we are going to get in trouble as a party if we don't have trained agents. So the party has organised agent training round the country in different locations. I'm doing mine in New York at the start of September. It's a day. If you're not a target seat, it's a day training. If you're a target seat, I think it's 2 days training. And being honest, and having spoken to kind of people from the region in the Northwest, they've said, so if you don't end up without an agent, then it will go, there will be someone assigned to you as an agent. And having spoken to the person in my area, he said, if you don't have a trained agent and I end up being it, you cannot spend any money at all because I'm not doing returns for 30, 40, etc. seats because I just can't do that. So I'm just going to tell you, you can't have a campaign and you can't have any money.
So let's go right back. Brilliant point, Sam. I think let's go right back to thinking, what is an agent? I think that is very important because some people that will know. So the election agent is the legal officer as part of your campaign, basically. So if Sam's the candidate here, there's a joke in Lib Dem circles that the least important people in a campaign is the actual candidate. Now, we won't be that cruel, but actually the agent is the person that signs off your leaflets. That's why that you'll see on the imprint, it will say published and promoted by X. And most of you listening will have done local election agents. The general election agent is just as similar, the person that makes sure your campaign stays on the right side of the law.
Yep. They're wonderful people, and it's a really selfless job. Like I can't tell you how much respect I have for people who are prepared to be an agent. I would rip somebody else's arm off for a good agent. But I think actually a lot of the time having a good agent is more valuable than a good candidate. Like it's because you need somebody who's prepared to, like, lots of people are prepared to get the attention and the kind of the being the person in the foreground kind of shouting about things they want to shout about. Very few people are prepared to be the person who takes on that responsibility and just gets things done. And so that I propose an agents award that all anyone who's an MP should have to put money into a pot, and the best agents in dead end seats should get a trophy from all those MPs. I think you do an amazing job.
But and also, again, if you were thinking, like I said, about becoming getting approved as a parliamentary candidate to help out, it isn't the worst training in the world for candidates to actually understand election law and have a little bit of a knowledge in that regard. I think, it helps you be a little bit more rounded as a candidate. Now, these training events the party are doing are long. It is a full day. But then, the agent is responsible for making sure you don't end up in jail or he or she doesn't end up in jail, things like that. So this is important. And we know with social media, with, news headlines, that it is so easy to be on the wrong end of this. And actually, the parties, and it's completely, this training's for free. The party's doing because the party has a stake in it as well. It doesn't want us to, ex-agent signs off leaflet calling such and such or whatever. We've seen those horror stories, and we need to have as minimum as them as possible. So yeah, go get your agents trained, because, like I say, you will, if you think you've been an agent in the past, that is now not good enough. You have to do this new training. This is not, if you think, if you have an agent that has the opinion, I know everything anyway, that's probably not a great agent. And actually getting a refresher course is always worthwhile, Sam.
It absolutely is. And like I said, we've been talking for about half an hour about what you can do at a general election campaign. If you don't have an agent, you don't have a general election campaign. Just just do that.
Yeah. Right. I've got one more thing I think that that local parties can be doing, and then Sam, I'll come back to you. So one of the ones I would also is just prepare for, again, we mentioned it a bit earlier, people are generally a bit more engaged with politics, a bit more interested in politics. As a local party, even if you're not a target one, think of how you can possibly capitalize on that extra engagement. So we talked about having thank you templates for letters ready to go for people that donate. Also, the people that step up and volunteer for the first time. You might get someone who's willing to do a leaflet run this time. They might be able to want to come and hear you speak or something like that. So actually can I think of a couple of venues that you might be able to hire out? And even if you don't get massive attendance, because town hall meetings aren't the same in the UK as they are in America, but having a way that people who are interested can come and see you. Maybe it's a series of street stalls. So they say, actually, I'll be really interested in you. Say, oh, actually, I'm going to be outside Preston train station this third Saturday and whatever. Think about having those sorts of events in place. It's the reason why we attend pride marches, why we attend all these other sorts of things, to put a visible showcase of who we are, or freshers weeks that are coming up for the university, same sort of thing. We need a chance for people to engage with us. So have ideas of events and stuff that you can do during the election period to allow people to see you and buy into you. Anything else from you, Sam?
So I think there's an opportunity to think about what your campaigns are, and because we often talk about campaigning in the practical sense, like the leaflets and the canvassing and so on, but we're in it to get things done. So I have a sort of campaign grid, and it's kind of environment, health and social care, road safety, and then everything else. But those are the things that kind of keep coming up. So I try and fit my local and ward campaigns, like as many as I can. I'm trying to hit those areas. And so suddenly you've got another level, you've got another tier, you've got kind of national campaigns that complement that. And what you can get out of it, you can run a petition on a national issue that is getting a bit more focus. Like there's going to be more focus around those national approaches. And so if you can piggyback onto that, but do it in a way that complements your local campaigns. Do you have, it works really well on sewage, and it doesn't have to be as part of the general election. But you've got a local river that is having sewage dumped everywhere in the country. That's a phenomenal amount of sewage is being dumped into a river near you. But you can run the national campaign about what's going on, and then you can do specific local stuff around it. At a general election, there's more opportunities for more of those type of national campaigns. They're in people's attention, and you can kind of go, yes, this huge national thing that you've been reading about, and it's really important in the general election, and here's how it affects you, because your street has also got this example of it, and really tie it into your local campaigns. I think that's a real opportunity.
Yeah, and you'll find, HQ's been a lot better at this, actually, in the last few years, actually getting usable resources that we can use as local parties, because we don't, most local parties don't have researchers or anything like that. The target seats will, but a lot of local parties don't. But so a classic example is the HQ did a sample data collection and press release regarding burglaries, and how the woeful attendance rates, let alone charging rates, let alone conviction rates. I took that, found it for Lancashire, sent in a press release, got picked up by all the press, gets picked up by all the local blogs, I was on Radio Lancashire regarding it. And, basically what I did was get this work they had done, adapt it locally for Lancashire, got a picture out of me outside a local police station. Again, do that little bit of effort to get, and it's amazing what you can do. And so with the campaigns that are coming for the general election, you're going to get more stuff like that, and you can use that. So if you're thinking about education, is the lack of school places in your area, again, tying that all together. So using the general election to help you with your local elections and your local campaigning. But again, like you saying, you can start planning this now, because the big general election theme is going to come up. It's going to be NHS, it's going to be the economy, it's going to be crime, it's going to be education. These sorts of things are going to come up. Or if you've got like a military base in your area, or if you're a coastal if you're a coastal constituency or coastal local party, these things, just having this in your head, maybe even making a note. And one thing I like to do is you have two kind of politics, because lots of people don't care about policy. Let's just get Lib Dems love it, but lots of people don't. So I have a list of head politics and gut politics. And how does that, and we talk about messaging a lot, Sam, about you're talking about passion and things like that. If you just roll off stats, that's not going to matter. It doesn't care. Most people, people get thrown stats to them all the time. But if you say, actually, we're doing this because it's going to really affect you here, and it's about your children and about your community, that you'll get so much more power out of that message.
Yeah, it's an emotional. So I was out delivering leaflets this morning. I got stopped by a lady. She's Israeli, Polish husband. She's interested in politics, but kind of not really engaged in British politics. But she just went, I'll tell you what your problem is, all you politicians. And she was being really nice. This wasn't done in an aggressive way. She said, you don't talk like people on the street. And that's that gut politics. Like, you just need to speak to people in a way that connects to them.
Although don't go full Lee Anderson. That is not the way forward. As we recorded this, Lee Anderson did his F off back to France stuff. There's a difference between being honest and being an arse. It's kind of the difference.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. But it's not about being honest. It's about speaking
authentic,
clearly and simply and connecting. You know, he has a lack of respect for decency.
Exactly.
That's a very different thing.
Yeah, that's another episode we will do at some point. Right. Thank you so much for that. So, anything further you want to give our hints to our wonderful listeners and viewers?
I was going to mention there was a really useful thing for you if you were a candidate at the last election, and I assume it'll be again, which was an information hub run by HQ, because you will get bombarded with like box questions, like 50 people send you the same, and there's a really useful hub that the party runs, so make sure you know where it is, where as soon as they've got a standard answer, we're getting template answers, so you'll get a template response, and then you can tweak it a bit to fit you, and then you've got a really good easy response. So know where that stuff is. That's a really useful thing to have ready and know that you've got.
And this is why I always recommend having a separate political email address to your own one, because my email address also has lots of folders. So for all these issues, whether it's summer-born children, whether it's fox hunting, whatever it is that you get lots of emails about. And I think at one general election, I just had lists upon lists of different folders. And particularly with, like, say, with these email systems now where it says, okay, contact all your candidates to sign up to the walking pledge or the pledge on such and such. It's dead useful to do. And you can manage that. Again, being prepared, get an email system sorted, figure out how you're going to deal with that. And you'll be all right. So thank you very much for that, Sam. I hope that was useful for you. As we get closer to the general election, we'll do far more episodes on things that come up and giving you advice. We've obviously got the conference coming up as well. For all those that haven't noticed, the conference agenda is up, including the manifesto consultation documents and all the rest of it. So, you will be doing lots from the conference. We will be doing lots before the conference and lots afterwards, because we are now in the run-up to the general election. So maybe this is, Sam, the first of our general election 2024, we think, podcast. So thanks very much, Sam, for being on today. We really appreciate it. I hope you guys have all enjoyed it, listening to it. Again, thank you to all those people that comment and question and want to engage with us. We really appreciate it. If you do want to ask us anything, feel free. We're on social media at Lib Dem Pod. You can contact myself and Sam at any point as well. And we'll be back with another episode very soon.
Bye-bye.